What happens when the one orchestrating your downfall is the very person you once buried? A warm golden light spread softly across the white tablecloth, creating an almost perfect setting. But Adrian Voss felt something was off. He sat alone, back straight, gaze seemingly unfocused, but his left hand rested on the edge of the table with a quiet tension pulsing beneath. A waiter approached, no greeting, no eye contact, and placed a neatly folded napkin beside the bread plate. The motion was too swift, too precise, as if it had been rehearsed. Adrian paused for half a second, then opened the napkin. 6 words appeared, scrawled in hurried but deliberate ink. "This is a trap. Don't react." He didn't blink, didn't frown, didn't move. He simply sat there as the sound of clinking glasses, murmured conversations, and faint laughter blended into a chorus of artificial ease. Everything at solstice tonight was too polished. Chandelier light glinting off red wine, music soft as mist, table linens unnervingly smooth. Adrian's eyes scanned the room. A couple leaned too close together. A man at the bar sipped wine while fidgeting with his phone a bit too conspicuously. Another guest typed on a laptop tilted at an odd angle. Everyone seemed to be playing a role. Nothing looked real, and that made everything terrifying. His hand clenched the napkin as if it weighed more than the steak knife beside him. Who knew he would be here tonight? And why? With his cap pulled low, scruffy beard, and thick-rimmed glasses, Adrian Voss, the man who built the Solstice dining empire from scratch, now appeared to be just another nameless diner. But as his fingers brushed over the ink on the napkin, his heart clenched. That handwriting, that style, it belonged to someone he had buried 7 years ago. Adrian Voss once believed he had learned how to control every situation, in business, in the kitchen, and even in the old, calculated atmosphere of boardroom meetings. But in that moment, when his eyes accidentally landed on the messy handwriting scrawled across the napkin, an old, hollow feeling surged back, a fear named memory. It had been 7 years since that fateful night, the fire that consumed the first Solstice location, the one he and Noah Drake had built together, from the first brick to the last dish on the menu. The police ruled it an accident caused by faulty wiring. Noah was trapped in the storeroom, and no intact remains were ever recovered. The funeral was private, the casket sealed, and condolences were offered in whispers no one dared raise above the silence. Adrian buried that past with todos and guilty and so, haunted by the question, what if I had gotten there sooner? But now, the handwriting before him whispered something impossible. Noah might still be alive. A nameless email sent 3 weeks earlier had been the first puzzle piece. Attached were 6 grainy, low-resolution photos taken from odd angles, a server dozing off mid-shift, a man in a chef's coat slipping cash into his pocket, a bartender secretly pouring something into a cocktail. But it was the last image that truly haunted Adrian. A man behind a kitchen window, only part of his face visible, but enough to recognize the sharp jawline, the scar running from temple to cheek, and the familiar half-turned posture Adrian had seen during hundreds of menu meetings. He had spent the past week convincing himself it was just coincidence. But now, inside the very restaurant bearing his name, faced with a warning written in the unmistakable script of a long-dead friend, Adrian no longer knew what to believe. If Noah was alive, then what exactly had died over the past 7 years? And why had he returned? 5 days ago, Adrian made a reservation under the name Mr. Elridge through the internal system. A VIP guest designation, discreet enough not to raise any alerts. He didn't notify his assistant, didn't signal the PR team, and gave no heads up to the branch manager. This wasn't a site inspection or a quality control visit. This was something entirely different, quiet, dangerous, and laced with the scent of betrayal. In preparation, Adrian shaved carelessly to create a slightly unkempt look, switched to large black-rimmed glasses, wore a faded khaki jacket, and stepped into a pair of scuffed shoes. He rehearsed a slower tone with a soft southern drawl, just enough to keep anyone familiar from recognizing him. And yet, when he stepped into the space of Solstice, what chilled him wasn't recognition. It was the lack of it. Not a single staff member looked surprised. No curious glances, no whispered questions, no signs of suspicion. But it was this smoothness that made Adrian wary. Everything felt lifted straight from the brochure. The wine glass tilted precisely 30 degrees. The napkin folded into a perfect symmetrical triangle. The familiar jazz soundtrack playing at a slightly lower pitch than usual. It felt as if no one truly lived in this room, as though everyone inside was performing a script already written. From the corner table by the window, Adrian scanned the room. The affectionate couple in the center laughed too often. The man at the bar kept checking his phone, yet the rear camera was angled directly toward him, and the woman near the kitchen pretended to adjust her laptop screen, repeatedly without typing a word. No one was eating, yet all of them appeared to be enjoying something. Then a blonde waitress glided past, and Adrian noticed something. She wasn't listed in any of the employee files he had ever approved. The stage was set, but he still didn't know whether he was the audience or the lead in this performance. The blonde waitress stopped by Adrian's table with a soft smile and a voice that had clearly been carefully trained. "Good evening, sir. Welcome to Solstice. Would you prefer still or sparkling water?" Her tone was properly formal, but lacked the warmth of someone who had ever truly belonged to this restaurant family. Adrian recognized it immediately. That was not the cadence taught by his team. But what chilled him was not the words. It was her eyes. She didn't look at him like a stranger, but as someone trying to conceal something. Then she placed a second napkin on the table. No expression, no eye contact, no explanation. Just a mechanical movement, as if it were part of a ceremony. Adrian waited until she walked away before gently unfolding it. Slanted handwriting in deep blue ink appeared clearly. Cameras everywhere. Most guests are actors. Don't react. His heartbeat jumped. This wasn't surveillance. This was theater, scripted and staged. Adrian no longer needed to guess. The people scattered across the room were strategically placed to observe him, to record his reactions, maybe even to provoke. He lowered the napkin, slid it beneath the bread plate, and exhaled slowly, keeping his face composed like a trained actor. But inside, questions spun like a storm. Who was directing this? What was their goal? And the woman who had just placed that napkin, was she really a stranger? Then a memory resurfaced with razor clarity. That handwriting belonged to Lana, once the sous chef at their very first location, one of Noah's most loyal team members. But Lana had vanished after the fire. No goodbye, No explanation. She was presumed dead alongside Noah. Yet here she was, alive, serving and writing warnings in their old code, which could only mean one thing. She was either on his side or playing both. Adrian subtly gripped the edge of the tablecloth, steadying his hand as the truth settled in. He was no longer the one in control of this space. Everything around him had been transformed into a carefully orchestrated performance. And then, like a signal to raise the curtain, a wine glass at the center table suddenly tipped over, red liquid spreading like a deep stain across the cream dress of the woman seated there. She leapt up as if burned, shouting, "I can't believe this!" Her voice carried farther than necessary, drawing glances from every corner, prompting a few guests to lift their phones. A man near the aisle clumsily tried to help, only to knock over another glass of water. The chaos was just loud enough to command attention, yet not enough to warrant security. Adrian remained still, eyes locked on the unfolding scene like a composed observer. Everything was too precise, too well timed. A waiter arrived at the exact moment, pulled out a napkin with flawless technique, and apologized in a tone that sounded rehearsed. But what struck Adrian more than the act itself was the absence of any real concern. No one looked genuinely distressed. Every reaction seemed tailored for someone watching from afar. And then he saw it. A man near the entrance, wearing a grey blazer and sporting a neatly cropped haircut, like a TV reporter, was slowly turning a button on his shirt. Under the light, it reflected with an unusual glint, round, shiny, and translucent like glass. It wasn't a button, it was a lens, a hidden recording camera. The man wasn't drinking, nor had he touched the appetizer in front of him. Yet his eyes never left Adrian, not for a second. Now it was clear. This wasn't just surveillance. This was a full-scale fabrication. Someone was trying to manufacture a scandal, and Adrian was the centerpiece, scripted to fail, to collapse in public view. But they had forgotten one thing. He wasn't just any actor. He was the one who had once built an entire stage. The atmosphere in this restaurant grew heavier by the minute, not because of the smell of food or the noise, but because of the unmistakable sense that everything was being choreographed down to the last detail. Adrian kept his gaze composed as another shout pierced the air. A guest rose from his seat, holding a half-finished plate of food in his hand. "You call this an entree? This food is ice cold. I want to speak to the manager now." The room held its breath for a beat. Then, once again, phones rose in unison, lenses pointed toward the man putting on a show. But this time, Adrian wasn't looking at the crowd. His eyes were fixed behind the bar, where a figure had just passed behind a wooden partition. A man with an upright posture, a deep blue coat, neatly combed hair, and a faint scar along the left temple. Adrian's eyes widened. There was no mistaking it. Even with only a glimpse, he knew it was Noah Drake. The man who once helped him hammer the first solstice sign into place. Subtul, the man who had been declared dead in the wreckage 7 years ago. And now, here he was, alive, standing behind the scenes, orchestrating everything like a cold, calculating director. When their eyes met across the room, Noah didn't look away. He simply tilted his head and offered a faint smile. A smile that had once symbolized shared vision now transformed into a declaration of challenge. In that moment, Adrian understood. This wasn't just an anonymous attack. This was the return of an old ghost, bringing with it the stage and the script. And this time, Adrian was the lead role, but he wasn't the one writing the play. Adrian kept his expression steady, like a man simply waiting for dessert. But in his mind, counter-strategies were slowly aligning into place. He couldn't walk out. He couldn't lash out. And under no circumstances could he reveal that he had recognized Noah. Because every single reaction, every furrowed brow, every breath was being recorded. Reaching into the inner pocket of his coat, Adrian quietly unlocked his phone and tapped on Go Live. The screen switched to the front, facing camera. His face appeared, calm, composed, the warm glow of the lights reflecting in his glasses. His voice came through soft and low, compelling anyone watching to lean in and listen. They've been watching me all evening, but now it's my turn to let you watch them. He slowly turned the camera, panning across the dining room. The couple was still whispering over a phone positioned at just the right angle. The man who had just thrown a tantrum was now adjusting the mic clipped inside his lapel, and in the back an older man with silver hair gave a subtle nod as if signaling a cue. Everything was staged. You want to see me fall? Adrian spoke quietly, eyes steady on the lens. Fine. But you forgot to double-check the script. He turned the camera to his plate, a seafood dish, supposedly the trigger for a severe allergic reaction, yet untouched. Solstice doesn't serve seafood on Fridays. That's been company policy since 2016. None of my chefs break that rule. His voice grew colder. So what exactly is she reacting to? In the distance, the woman mid-performance suddenly froze. Everything in the room seemed to slow. For the first time, Adrian was no longer just being watched. He was taking back the stage. Adrian stepped calmly away from his chair, phone still recording. The camera sweeping toward the open kitchen, where the so-called chef was yelling at a junior staff member, "Get out of my kitchen if you can't do it right." The line rang out with the flair of a bad reality TV script. But Adrian didn't flinch. He simply stood there, his gaze sharp as a blade. "Impressive," he said, voice low and even. "Only one small problem. Solstice's executive chef, Mr. Roberto Mares, lost his voice permanently in a car accident 2 years ago." He brought the camera closer to the man still shouting behind the counter. "So if he's yelling, we're either witnessing a medical miracle or this is an actor." A wave of murmurs swept through the dining room. Some guests lowered their phones. One man exhaled audibly, muttering, "What a farce." Adrian nodded slightly, then turned the lens toward the napkin bearing Lana's handwriting. "This is no longer a restaurant mishap. This is a meticulously staged setup designed to destroy a brand and a person." Then, slowly, he opened a video file already queued on his phone. Grainy black and white footage, time-stamped 2 nights ago, inside a deserted warehouse. On screen, a man in a dark blazer stood in the center of the room, handing out envelopes to several people. The woman who faked the allergy, the affectionate couple, the angry man, even the chef. No dialogue, no voiceover needed. The man distributing the cash was unmistakably Noah Drake. The room thickened with tension. This was no longer just a game. The truth had a face and proof, and the watchers were now being watched by the irrefutable silence of a recorded image. As the video froze on the frame of Noah handing an envelope to the woman who had faked an allergy, the entire restaurant seemed to freeze with it. The whispers faded. Phones that had been secretly recording shifted their focus, no longer aimed at Adrian, but at the unfolding truth. Then Lana appeared, composed and precise, still in her server's uniform, holding her own phone. Without a word, she stepped beside Adrian and launched a second live stream. The angle from her apron pocket revealed the entire back area behind the bar. Noah, standing behind a partition, wearing an earpiece and signaling with his hands, directing each move like a live broadcast producer. He nodded after every burst of chaos, mouthing cues just before each actor performed. The footage was brutally clear. At one point, Noah looked directly into Lana's camera, unaware he was being filmed. Then came the audio, Noah's dry, low voice. Wait for him to crack. Catch the exact moment his eyes shatter. That's the money shot. The room fell into complete silence. Adrian glanced at Lana just once. No thanks needed. No words exchanged. The truth now had two channels, one from a CEO under attack and one from a witness within the operation. That alone was enough to flip the entire game. No more speculation. No more doubt. This was a deliberate takedown, funded, scripted, and orchestrated. And the man behind the curtain, once a brother and trusted friend, was now exposed under the spotlight he had created himself. The sudden swing of the main door startled the entire restaurant. A team of federal agents in dark uniforms entered, forming a solid formation. No one said a word, but every raised phone instantly turned toward them. The soft glow of the Solstice logo overhead reflected off jackets that clearly bore the words, Federal Agent. Adrian didn't turn his head. He simply stepped aside, allowing every gaze to focus directly on the target. Noah Drake was standing near the bar, one hand still on his earpiece, his face pale. Before he could remove his mic, two agents placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "Noah Drake," a stern voice announced. "You are under arrest for fraud, property damage, and orchestrating a staged incident with the intent to defame." Noah didn't resist, didn't scream. He closed his eyes for a brief moment before being handcuffed and escorted past tables now frozen in silence. As he passed Adrian, their eyes met for the final time. No longer friends, no longer enemies. Just two men standing on opposite ends of what was right. At that moment, as if an invisible weight had lifted, a round of applause erupted from one table, then another. Soon, the entire restaurant stood, one by one, clapping in quiet solidarity. On Adrian's live stream, viewership surged past 80,000. Comments flooded in. "This is real justice. I knew it. The truth is out." Adrian stood motionless, the soft camera light casting calm across his face. The smear campaign had been exposed. But what was restored that night wasn't just reputation. It was trust. As the door closed behind Noah, the final sound was the cold, sharp clink of handcuffs, cutting through the air like a full stop. There was no need for a victory speech, no cheers. Adrian simply gave a small nod to Lana, the one who had stood beside him throughout the silent battle. She remained quiet. The live stream on her phone now ended, but her eyes were brighter than ever. He stepped closer and pulled from his pocket a small silver key. Old, but gleaming at the handle, a key Noah once held back in Solstice's earliest days. Without ceremony, Adrian placed it in Lana's hand. "From now on," he said, just loud enough to be heard, "you're in charge of this location." Her eyes widened, lips pressed together, as if holding back something rising from deep within her chest. "Are you sure?" Adrian nodded. "As sure as I am that you never turned away, when everyone else was pretending." In that moment, part celebration, part stillness, the key was more than a symbol of authority. It was a confirmation, a trust restored. No press release, no plaques. Lana had proven her worth through action, not title. And now she was no longer the woman behind the counter or the one placing napkins. She was the new gatekeeper of Solstice, representing a new chapter. Less glamour, more grit, and no more illusions. Adrian turned to leave without another word. Because he knew loyalty never needed the spotlight. It only needed a timely nod and a key placed in the right hands. Adrian walked slowly toward the center of the restaurant, where the tables had been cleared, the dark wooden chairs neatly stacked, leaving behind a silence that felt almost sacred. Each step echoed softly across the stone floor. There were no more cameras, no more spectators, only the precious stillness after a storm. Overhead, the lights began shutting off one by one until a single dim glow remained, casting a soft beam onto the solstice sign reflected through the large window. That light landed gently on Adrian's chest, then traced the contours of his face like a quiet embrace from a dream that had nearly been stolen. He stood there for a long moment, unmoving, needing no words. In his mind, there were no images of betrayal, no memories of the fire years ago, no trace of Noah's eyes as he was led away. There was only one question left. If reputation can be staged, then what remains that is truly real? Adrian pulled out his phone and turned the camera toward himself, recording one final message. His voice was low and steady, each word not spoken to defend himself, but to awaken anyone who had ever been wounded by deceit. "Reputation can be stolen, twisted, turned into a show," he said. "But character, no one can take that from you unless you give it away yourself." He paused for a beat. "If you've ever been misunderstood, if you've ever been judged before you had the chance to speak, leave a comment. So was I." As the screen slowly faded to black, the first words began to appear. "So was I. So was I. So was I." There were no stage lights left, but the real light had returned, quiet and unwavering. In a world where truth can be staged and reputations distorted in an instant, it is composure and inner strength that keep us standing. Adrian didn't need to shout to prove he was right. He only needed to refuse to bow to injustice. If you believe that character cannot be stripped away by bright lights or camera lenses, then like this video, subscribe to the channel to help spread the truth, and don't forget to leave a comment with 3 simple words, "So was I," because silence can shatter when enough people choose to speak.